She gave everything for her family, but when she needed them most, they were nowhere to be found. What happens next will leave you speechless. Watch till the end to see how one decision changed everything forever. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Martha Williams sat by the large bay window of her luxurious mansion, gazing out at the snowy front yard. The Christmas lights illuminated the fresh blanket of snow, creating a picturesque holiday scene. At 70 years old, Martha was an extraordinary woman. An African-American powerhouse in the automotive industry, she owned the controlling shares of one of the biggest luxury car companies in America. Her life was a testament to resilience and success, but tonight, success felt hollow. Tonight, she wanted only one thing: the presence of her 5 sons, Marcus, Justin, Elijah, Travis, and Jacob. She moved slowly but gracefully through her lavishly decorated living room. The Christmas tree sparkled with gold and silver ornaments, and the smell of fresh pine filled the air. Gifts were carefully placed under the tree, each one bearing a label with one of her sons' names. The dining table was a masterpiece. Plates of honey-glazed ham, roast turkey, garlic butter salmon, and a wide array of sides like mashed potatoes, stuffing, and cranberry sauce lined the table. Every inch of it was perfect. It was a dinner worthy of royalty. Her housekeeper, Lauren Carter, finished polishing the silverware before placing the last set of forks on the table. Lauren, a Latina woman in her mid-40s, had been with Martha for over a decade. To Lauren, Martha was more than just her employer. She was like a second mother. Watching Martha beam with excitement about her son's arrival tugged at Lauren's heart. She had seen this scene play out too many times before. Every year, Martha poured her heart and soul into preparing the perfect Christmas dinner for her sons, and every year they disappointed her. Lauren feared this year would be no different. "Miss Martha, are you sure they're coming this year?" Lauren asked carefully, adjusting a napkin on the table. "Of course they're coming, Lauren," Martha replied with a smile, her voice full of hope. "It's Christmas, and I know my boys. They'll come home. They have to." Lauren glanced at the 5 gift-wrap boxes under the Christmas tree, one for each of Martha's sons. Her heart ached knowing what would likely happen. She saw through the sons' behavior, but she didn't want to crush Martha's spirit. Martha had always been a proud woman, and no matter how selfish her children were, she never gave up on them. "I'm sure you're right," Lauren said softly, though she wasn't convinced. Shortly after, Lauren gathered her things and prepared to head home to her husband Miguel and their 3 kids, Noah, Hunter, and Sky. Before leaving, she hesitated at the door and glanced back at Martha. The older woman was staring at her phone with eager eyes, likely waiting for a message from one of her boys. It broke Lauren's heart. "Miss Martha, if anything happens, just call me, okay?" Lauren said gently. "I'll be fine, dear," Martha replied with a small wave. "Go be with your family. Merry Christmas." Lauren gave her one last look before stepping outside into the cold, her breath visible in the winter air. She could only hope that, for once, Martha's sons would surprise her and show up. The hours passed slowly. Martha sat in the living room, scrolling through her phone every few minutes. Her sons were grown men, all in their 30s, but to her, they were still her boys. She stared at the phone, expecting it to light up with a message from one of them, but nothing came. At 7 p.m., she called Marcus, the eldest. No answer. She tried Justin. No answer. One by one, she called all 5 of her sons, but no one picked up. Her heart grew heavy, but she refused to give up hope. They're probably on their way, she told herself as she placed her phone on the armrest of the sofa. An hour later, still no sign of them. Anxiety began to build in her chest. She called Marcus again, but this time it went straight to voicemail. She tried Justin again. Same result. Frustration crept into her heart. Her fingers hovered over her phone as she debated calling Lauren, but she didn't want to worry her. Instead, she opened her voice messaging app and sent a message to the family group chat. "Hey boys, it's Mom. Just wanted to check if you're on your way. Everything's ready, and I'm so excited to see you all. Call me back when you can. Love you." She stared at the screen for a moment, waiting for the read receipts to appear. None of her sons read the message. Her smile slowly faded as reality settled in. Meanwhile, in a downtown nightclub, Marcus, Justin, Elijah, Travis, and Jacob were surrounded by music, flashing lights, and the chaos of a holiday party. Bottles of champagne were popped, women were laughing, and the bass of the music shook the walls. Marcus took a long sip of his drink, glancing down at his phone as it buzzed with a new message. He laughed when he saw the name Mom pop up on the screen. "Here we go," Marcus snickered, showing the screen to his brothers. "Look at this. Are you on your way? Everything's ready. She really thinks we're coming." Elijah chuckled, tilting his head back. "She's probably got that same old boring Christmas music playing, thinking we're going to hold hands and pray at the table." "Man, she does this every year," Travis added, rolling his eyes. "She's got to learn." They all laughed, letting the phone vibrate on the table. None of them replied. Back at the house, Martha sat in the dimly lit living room, her eyes shifting between the door and her phone. At 10 p.m., she realized the truth. They weren't coming. She sent one last message, this time more desperate than before. "Please, boys, even if it's just for a little while, I'd love to see you all. I miss you." Minutes later, the replies trickled in, one by one. Marcus claimed he was stuck in traffic. Justin said he caught a cold, and Elijah claimed he was dealing with something important. The lies were so obvious it hurt. She stared at her phone, tears welling up in her eyes. She didn't bother replying. At 11:30 p.m., Martha stood in front of the fully decorated Christmas tree. Her reflection in the glass ornaments looked worn and tired. The smile she had earlier was gone, replaced by sadness and disbelief. She gazed at the untouched plates of food, the unopened bottles of champagne, and the perfectly set table meant for 6 people. But she was alone. Her heart ached as she turned off the lights, one by one. Her once bright and joyful home was now dark and silent. In the kitchen, she packed up the food into containers, putting everything into the fridge. She didn't even have the appetite to taste it. The only sound in the house was the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. She went upstairs, her footsteps slow and heavy. Once in her bedroom, she curled up on the edge of her bed, clutching her pillow tightly. She thought about her life, about all the sacrifices she'd made for her sons. She had given them everything: wealth, opportunity, love. But tonight, she realized something she had refused to accept for years. They didn't care. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered into the darkness, "Why, God, why don't they love me?" At the same time, across town, Lauren and her family gathered at their small kitchen table. It wasn't a lavish feast, but it was filled with love and warmth. Her husband, Miguel, carved a small ham while their kids laughed and played with each other. They said a short prayer before eating, thanking God for family, health, and togetherness. While eating, Noah glanced up at his mother, noticing she looked distracted. "Mom, you okay?" he asked. Lauren smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm just thinking about Miss Martha," she admitted. "I hope she's not alone tonight." Silence fell over the table as everyone glanced at one another. Then Noah spoke up. "Why don't we go check on her?" His words hung in the air for a moment before Lauren nodded. "That's a great idea." Minutes later, they bundled up in coats and scarves, carrying a few plates of cookies and homemade tamales. The family piled into their car, driving to Martha's mansion. When they arrived, they rang the doorbell. Inside, Martha stirred. Her eyes, puffy from crying, opened slowly. She wiped her face, glanced at the clock, and wondered who could be at the door so late. But when she peeked through the window and saw Lauren and her family, her heart swelled with warmth. For the first time that night, she smiled. She wasn't alone after all. The warmth of laughter and the clinking of silverware echoed through the grand dining room of Martha Williams' mansion. The table that had once been a painful reminder of her loneliness was now full of life. Plates of food were being passed around, and the sweet aroma of roasted turkey and honey-glazed ham filled the air. Lauren's children, Noah, Hunter, and Sky, giggled and chatted excitedly as they dug into their plates. Their father, Miguel, was seated next to them, slicing turkey for Sky and ensuring the children had enough to eat. It was a simple but joyful scene, one Martha had not experienced in years. Martha sat at the head of the table, watching them with a soft smile on her face. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was part of something real. Her heart, which had been heavy with grief earlier that night, was now full of warmth and love. The sound of Noah calling her Grandma Martha had nearly brought tears to her eyes. She hadn't felt this loved in so long. It was as though she had been surrounded by strangers her whole life, only to find her true family right here. "Grandma Martha, can I have more mashed potatoes?" asked Sky, her little eyes wide with excitement. "Of course, my sweet girl," Martha replied, standing up slowly. But before she could lift the serving spoon, Lauren gently placed her hand on Martha's arm. "Sit down, Miss Martha," Lauren said with a warm smile. "You've done enough tonight. Let me handle it." "No, no, child," Martha chuckled softly. "I insist. It's been so long since I had little ones around the table like this. Let me do it." Lauren stepped aside, letting Martha serve Sky another scoop of mashed potatoes. As she did, she glanced at the tree in the corner of the room, its lights softly blinking in the dimly lit space. The gifts she had bought for her sons sat untouched beneath it, their shiny wrapping paper still pristine. But tonight, it didn't matter. The gifts weren't for them anymore. Her heart was no longer burdened with thoughts of ungrateful children. As the meal continued, the air was filled with love, laughter, and the stories shared between bites. Miguel talked about his work at the factory, and Hunter proudly shared how he scored a goal in his soccer game. Lauren chimed in, reminding him that he owed his success to all those practice hours in the backyard. Martha watched them all with a peaceful grin. She had never imagined that her Christmas could feel this way. "Grandma Martha," Noah said suddenly, his eyes locked on the glittering tree, "can we open the presents?" His excitement was infectious, and Hunter and Sky's eyes lit up. They turned to Martha with pleading looks, their small hands clasped together like they were about to beg. Lauren's eyes widened, and she quickly shook her head. "No, no, no, those aren't for you kids," Lauren said quickly, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Those are for Miss Martha's sons." But before Lauren could say another word, Martha raised her hand, her eyes soft with understanding. "It's okay, Lauren," she said with a kind smile. "Those gifts were meant for my sons, but tonight I'd rather give them to children who actually deserve them." Silence fell over the room for a moment as everyone stared at her. Tears shimmered in Lauren's eyes, but she held them back. Her children, meanwhile, looked at each other, their faces glowing with excitement. "Are you serious, Grandma Martha?" Noah asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Go ahead, baby," Martha said with a wave of her hand. "Go open them, all of you." Hunter, Sky, and Noah didn't need to be told twice. They darted towards the tree like a pack of puppies, dropping to their knees and tearing into the colorful wrapping paper with eager hands. Laughter echoed throughout the room as shreds of paper flew in every direction. Their joy was contagious, and even Lauren couldn't help but let out a soft laugh. Sky let out a loud squeal as she unwrapped a beautiful doll with shiny brown hair that looked just like hers. "Look, look, she's just like me," she shouted, spinning around to show her mother. "That's beautiful, baby girl," Lauren said, wiping her eyes with a napkin. Hunter pulled out a box that revealed a brand new tablet. His eyes widened in shock. "A tablet? No way!" he yelled, looking up at Martha. "For real, Grandma Martha? This is mine?" "All yours, baby," Martha said, nodding. "Use it wisely." Noah opened his box to find a pair of sleek wireless headphones. He held them up like a prized trophy. "Whoa, these are the ones I wanted for my birthday," he shouted, his smile wider than ever. "Thank you, Grandma Martha." One by one, the children rushed to Martha's side, wrapping their little arms around her. They squeezed her tightly, their faces buried in her chest. "Thank you, Grandma Martha. Thank you," they cried in unison. Martha's heart felt like it might burst from all the love she was feeling. She hugged them back, closing her eyes for a moment to let it all sink in. For once, she felt valued. She felt loved. She had spent her whole life given to people who only took from her, but tonight she had finally given to people who appreciated her. Lauren stepped forward, shaking her head with a look of disbelief. "Miss Martha, you didn't have to do all this," she said, her voice cracking. "You've already done so much for us." "Lauren," Martha said, pulling the woman into a gentle hug, "you've given me more than you'll ever know. I've spent so many years waiting for my sons to treat me like family. But tonight, I realize that I already have a family. It's you. It's all of you." Lauren couldn't hold back her tears any longer. They streamed down her face as she hugged Martha even tighter. For years, she had seen Martha give and give, only to be ignored by her own children. But now, Martha was surrounded by people who genuinely loved her. The night stretched on with more stories, laughter, and love. Martha played with Sky's new doll, helped Hunter set up his tablet, and watched Noah connect his headphones to his phone. She had never felt so much joy. At one point, she glanced toward the dining room where the food they had shared still sat on the table. It wasn't about the food, it wasn't about the decorations, it was about this moment, this perfect, fleeting moment where she was truly happy. By midnight, the children were starting to doze off. Lauren and Miguel gathered them together, preparing to leave. They bundled them in warm coats and scarves as Martha stood by the door, watching them with a bittersweet smile. "Miss Martha, thank you again for everything," Lauren said, squeezing Martha's hand. "You really made this Christmas unforgettable." "No, child," Martha said softly. "You made it unforgettable for me." As they stood by the door, Martha glanced at Lauren and said something she had been holding back all night. "You know, I'm not fooled by that story about your table breaking," she said with a smirk. "I know you didn't want me to be alone tonight, and for that, I thank you." Lauren looked at her with wide eyes, guilt flashing across her face. "I'm so sorry, Miss Martha. I just didn't want you to be sad." "Don't apologize," Martha replied, pulling her in for another hug. "That's what family does for each other." With that, Lauren and her family left, but Martha felt no sadness. Instead, she stood at the window, watching the snow fall gently outside. Her eyes drifted to the Christmas tree, where a few remaining gifts still sat unopened. They didn't matter anymore. She had everything she needed. For the first time in years, she had experienced what it was like to feel loved. Later that night, Martha lay in her bed, feeling more at peace than she had in a long, long time. Her eyes fluttered shut, a smile still on her face as she drifted off to sleep, her heart warm and full. She had no idea it would be her last Christmas. The cold morning sun peeked through the large bay windows of Martha Williams' grand mansion. Everything about the house was as pristine as ever. The gold-accented furniture, the hand-woven rugs, and the glistening Christmas tree that still stood in the living room, its lights twinkling softly. But the warmth that had filled the house just a few nights ago was gone. A heavy stillness hung in the air. Upstairs, Martha lay in her bed, motionless. Her face was calm, eyes closed as if she were merely sleeping, but the peacefulness of her expression masked the truth. Martha Williams was gone. When Lauren arrived that morning, she knew something was wrong the moment she stepped inside. It was too quiet. Martha usually greeted her from the kitchen or the living room, always ready to offer her a cup of tea or a quick chat before starting the day. But this morning, nothing. Silence. She called out, "Miss Martha, it's Lauren. I'm here." Her voice echoed back to her. Her heart tightened with worry. She put down her bag and walked upstairs to Martha's bedroom. The door was slightly open, and as she stepped inside, she froze. There was Martha, lying in her bed, still as stone. "Miss Martha?" Lauren's voice shook as she approached. "Miss Martha, wake up." She placed her hand on Martha's shoulder and gently shook her. Cold. Her fingers recoiled. Lauren's breath caught in her chest. "No, no, 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 no," she muttered, panic setting in. She pressed 2 fingers against Martha's neck, feeling for a pulse, but there was none. Her vision blurred as tears welled up in her eyes. "Miss Martha, please," she cried, her voice cracking. She scrambled to grab her phone from her pocket and dialed 911. "Please, I need an ambulance. My boss isn't breathing. I think she's gone. Please, hurry." The dispatcher's calm voice on the other end of the line did little to soothe Lauren's rising panic. She stayed on the phone, pacing back and forth as she stared at Martha's still body. Her heart ached with guilt. "I should have stayed. I should have stayed," she whispered to herself, wiping tears from her cheeks. The paramedics arrived 15 minutes later, but by then Lauren knew it was too late. The medical team confirmed it. Martha Williams had passed away from a heart attack during the night. Lauren sat on the edge of the bed, her head in her hands. She felt helpless. She'd always been there for Martha, but in her final moments, she had been alone. News of Martha's passing spread quickly. It didn't take long for her 5 sons, Marcus, Justin, Elijah, Travis, and Jacob, to arrive. Not out of grief, but for something far less noble. They didn't ask how she died. They didn't ask if she was in pain. The first words out of Marcus's mouth as he stepped into the house were, "So, what's happening with the inheritance?" Lauren, still shaken from the events of the morning, stood in the kitchen as the 5 brothers marched in like they owned the place. Their loud voices and careless laughter echoed through the halls as if nothing tragic had happened. They barely glanced at the spot where their mother had been found. Man, I told y'all she was gonna go soon, Travis laughed, nudging Justin. All those years of stress. No surprise. You think she left the house to one of us? Elijah asked, grinning as he plopped down on the leather couch in the living room. I'm calling dibs on her jewelry. Lauren clenched her fists, her jaw tightening with anger. She tried to remain professional, but hearing them speak about Martha like that made her blood boil. These were her sons? The men who were supposed to be grieving their mother? It was disgusting. Hey, Lauren, Marcus called from the couch. Why don't you be useful and make us some coffee or something? You know, now that Mom's gone, you're basically out of a job, so you better be nice to us. The others laughed. Lauren's eyes darkened as she glanced at Marcus. For a moment, she wanted to say something, to scream at them, to tell them how worthless they were. But she bit her tongue. She would not let them see her break. Not here. Not now. Instead, she grabbed her coat and bag. I don't work for you, she said coldly, walking toward the door. Yeah, keep walking, Marcus called after her. You'll be back begging for a job when we own this place. Lauren didn't stop. She didn't turn around. She didn't need to. 3 days later, the funeral was held at a local church. It was a small, intimate service attended by Martha's closest friends, a few business colleagues, and, of course, Lauren and her family. The Williams brothers were nowhere to be seen. Not a single one of them showed up. The church was filled with soft hymns, the scent of fresh lilies, and the sound of muffled sobs. Lauren had personally arranged the service, ensuring that Martha's favorite flowers, white lilies, decorated the altar. She had also asked the pastor to read a passage from the Bible that Martha loved. Honor your father and your mother. She hoped somewhere, somehow, Martha's sons would hear those words. At the end of the service, Lauren stood in front of the crowd. Her voice trembled as she spoke, but she pushed through. Miss Martha was more than my boss. She was family. She gave so much to people who didn't deserve it, but she never stopped giving. In her final days, she found love. Real love, and I will never forget her for that. Rest in peace, Miss Martha. We love you. As tears streamed down her face, she sat back in her seat next to Miguel. Her heart ached, but she knew Martha was finally at peace. 2 weeks later, the Williams brothers received a summons to the downtown law office handling Martha's estate. They strutted into the boardroom with wide smiles, dressed in expensive designer clothes that their mother had probably paid for. Each of them was confident that they were about to become millionaires. They laughed and whispered to each other, already planning how to spend their inheritance. The lawyer, Mr. Charles Redding, entered the room with a leather-bound file in his hands. He sat down, adjusting his glasses as he gazed at each of them with calm professionalism. Gentlemen, Mr. Redding began, flipping through the papers, today we're here to review the final will and testament of your mother, Martha Williams. Yeah, skip the intro, Marcus said, grinning. Just tell us how much we're getting. Mr. Redding's eyes didn't waver. He cleared his throat and began to read. I, Martha Williams, being of sound mind and body, declare that all my financial assets, my home, and my controlling shares in Williams Automotive shall be left to... He paused, his eyes lifting to look at the brothers. Lauren Carter. The room went silent. Wait, what? Marcus snapped, leaning forward. No. That's gotta be a mistake. It's no mistake, Mr. Redding replied, flipping the document around for them to see. Everything, including the mansion and her majority stake in the company, now belongs to Lauren Carter. You're lying. Elijah slammed his fists on the table. She wouldn't do that. We're her sons. Her sons who never showed up. Mr. Redding said bluntly. This was her decision. If you have any complaints, feel free to contact the court. But I doubt you'll win. Rage filled the room. Chairs were kicked and curses filled the air as the brothers realized they had lost everything. Every account, every house, every dime. Marcus stormed out of the room, swearing vengeance, but the others stayed, shouting at Mr. Redding. But it was over. Lauren sat in her new home, the Williams mansion, that night. Her family sat around the same dining table where they had shared Christmas dinner with Martha. The home was filled with laughter and warmth once again. Lauren had received a letter from Martha that morning, and as she read it for the 100th time, tears slid down her cheeks. Dear Lauren, you are the daughter I never had. You gave me the love I searched for my entire life. Please, take this home and make it a place of joy and peace. It is yours now. I have no regrets. With love, Martha. Lauren folded the letter and smiled. She looked at her family, their faces glowing with love and happiness. This was her home now. A home that would be filled with love, just like Martha wanted. And every Christmas after that, Lauren would sit by the same window, watching the snow fall, surrounded by the family she had built. And every year they would raise a glass to honor the woman who had given them everything. Her name was Martha Williams, and she would never be forgotten. Times, family isn't defined by blood, but by love and loyalty. What do you think about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story like this one.